The night started out like many others in that Beverly Hills mansion, with the television glowing in the downstairs den and the sound of a James Bond movie filling the room. Jose and Kitty Menendez settled into the couches in what they called the screening room, a den off the main floor of their home on North Elm Drive. It was a warm Sunday night in August. The house was quiet and familiar. They had no idea their two sons were moving toward them with loaded shotguns. Upstairs, 21-year-old Lyle and 18-year-old Erik had already made their choice. For days, according to their later testimony, they had been circling around it, convinced that their father was going to kill them after years of what they described as sexual, emotional, and physical abuse. Prosecutors would later say that explanation was a lie, that the real motive was money and control over their father's fortune. But on that night, the brothers walked down the hall with Mossberg 12-gauge shotguns they had bought 2 days earlier at a sporting goods store in San Diego. The den was dark except for the television when they came through the doorway. Jose sat in his usual chair, his back partly to the door. Kitty lounged nearby, watching The Spy Who Loved Me. The first shotgun blast hit Jose in the back of the head, throwing him forward. More shots followed, hitting his arm and body. Kitty tried to scramble away, slipping on the couch and then the floor as pellets tore into her legs and torso. She was hit again and again. In seconds, the quiet house turned into a slaughter scene. When it was over, Jose and Kitty were barely recognizable. Jose had been shot 6 times. One close-range blast destroyed much of his head. Kitty had been shot 10 times. Investigators later said it was one of the most brutal crime scenes they had ever encountered. The brothers left the den, drove off in Lyle's car, and began the next part of the plan. They didn't go straight to the police. Instead, they headed out to create an alibi, driving around and buying movie tickets. Later, they came back to the house and acted as if they had just discovered the bodies. At 11:47 p.m., a frantic call came into 911 from the mansion. On the tape, Lyle's voice is panicked as he yells that someone has shot his parents. Erik can be heard sobbing in the background. When officers arrived, they found the brothers out on the lawn, crying and hugging each other. At first, detectives considered the possibility that this was a professional hit. The brutality of the attack, the close-range shotgun blasts, and Jose's business ties made a mob-style killing seem plausible. Lyle himself told officers that his father had enemies and suggested it might be related to his work in the entertainment industry. The police looked into that angle, but there were no signs of forced entry, no ransacked rooms, and no clear evidence of intruders. In the weeks after the murders, the brothers' behavior began to raise questions. Instead of lying low, they started spending large amounts of money from their parents' accounts. They bought luxury cars, watches, and clothes. Lyle purchased a restaurant in Princeton, New Jersey. Erik hired a tennis coach and traveled. To prosecutors, that spending spree later became a key part of their argument. 2 sons who killed for inheritance and then started enjoying it. Privately, Erik was unraveling. He began seeing a Beverly Hills psychologist named Dr. Jerome Oziel. In sessions with him, Erik eventually broke down and admitted that he and Lyle had killed their parents. He talked about the abuse he said he had endured from his father and the fear that a confrontation inside the family had escalated into a decision to kill. Oziel secretly recorded some of these sessions. His mistress, Judalon Smythe, later went to the police and told them what she had heard about the brothers' confessions. On March 8, 1990, nearly 7 months after the murders, Lyle was arrested in Beverly Hills. Erik, who had gone to Israel for a tennis event, flew back and turned himself in 3 days later. Both were charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and conspiracy in the deaths of their parents. Prosecutors initially sought the death penalty, arguing that the brothers had lain in wait and executed Jose and Kitty to secure control of a multi-million-dollar estate. From the start, the defense chose a strategy that put the family's private life under a microscope. Attorney Leslie Abramson framed the case around years of alleged sexual and physical abuse. In court, the brothers told jurors that Jose had abused Erik from a young age and that the household was ruled by fear. Kitty, they said, was emotionally unstable and refused to protect them. They claimed that by August 1989, after a confrontation about the abuse, they were terrified that their parents were going to kill them to keep the family's secrets hidden. The prosecution painted a different picture. They acknowledged that Jose could be demanding and strict, but they rejected the abuse allegations as exaggerated or fabricated. Instead, they focused on the planning, the purchase of the shotguns using a friend's stolen ID, the way the brothers destroyed possible evidence like their father's updated will, and the spending that followed. To them, this was a calculated double murder committed by two young men who knew their parents were considering changes to their estate and feared being cut off. The first set of trials, starting in 1993, were televised and drew national attention. Each brother had his own jury. Erik and Lyle took the stand and described the alleged abuse and the terror they said they felt in the days before the killings. In early 1994, both juries deadlocked, with no unanimous verdict on whether the killings were premeditated murder or something closer to manslaughter committed in fear. The judge declared mistrials. Prosecutors decided to try the case again. In the second trial, which began in 1995, the judge limited how the abuse claims could be presented and barred some of the most emotional testimony. This time, there was one jury for both brothers. The prosecution again stressed the financial motive and the careful planning. The defense still argued that years of trauma had shaped the brothers' state of mind, but the presentation was narrower than in the first trials. On March 20th, 1996, the jury returned its verdict. Both Lyle and Erik were found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, with special circumstances for lying in wait and conspiracy to commit murder. The special circumstances meant they were eligible for the death penalty, but in the penalty phase, the jury chose life instead. On July 2, 1996, the judge sentenced both brothers to life in prison without the possibility of parole, to be served consecutively. Decades later, changing laws in California and new attention to youthful offenders and abuse claims shifted the legal landscape. The brothers, who were in their early 20s at the time of the murders, argued that their age and the alleged trauma they had experienced should matter in how their sentences were viewed. In 2025, after more than 3 decades behind bars, a judge resentenced Lyle and Erik under updated California rules, reducing their punishment to terms of 50 years to life and making them eligible to seek parole. Their convictions still stand, and any release will depend on decisions by the parole board and the governor. Inside prison, by most accounts, the brothers have worked, studied, and participated in programs, and they have expressed remorse for killing their parents, even as they continue to insist that the abuse allegations are true. Whether the world believes them, and whether that belief should change the consequences for what they did on that August night in Beverly Hills, remains an unresolved question hanging over the case. Thank you for listening to Homicide Files. Subscribe for more true crime stories.